Hi, it's Tara from Chaley's Couture Quilting, and I'm showing you how I bind my quilts, especially ones that are going to be used a lot, like my memory quilts. I'll start on the back and I will turn it to the front and I will attach it down both by machine. So on the back I sew it with machine and on the front I sew it with machine. If I were to do this for a show quilt, I would sew it on the front and then turn it and then hand bind it to the back. I'm using 2.5 strips for the binding, and I'm using a 90 needle, quilting needle. I'm using a 97D with dual feed on my Bernina 770, and I'm also using, when I turn it, I'll be using the 10D on the front. I've already started it a little bit and left my tail where I ended the tail is 15 inches and I started it, and when I get back near the end of that tail a little ways before, I'll join it together seamlessly. Okay, so here we go. The machine is adjusted to a 3mm stitch. That's the best for thick fabrics. It's not having any puckering or any problems. Go, and I just take my time and adjust, and I'm on a big table, equivalent to like a dining room table. I to balance the weight of the quilt so that it's not slipping as you're doing this. And I'm just going to keep on going. All right, keep on. I actually like putting on binding, and I like doing it this way versus a walking foot because I feel like I have more control. It's not getting too out of hand when it's going through. The batting is an 80/20 from Quilter's Dream. I have done this for really thick batting, so double layers. I've done it with 80/20 with a bottom layer and a wool for the show quilts. I don't find I have any problems going through the first part of the binding for that. When I sew it to the top, it doesn't seem to give me any problems. No puckers. The important thing is to kind of make sure you're adjusting and making sure that your quilt edge and your binding is next to each other. And again, I'm using a 3 on the Bernina for stitch length. I do have the dual feed engaged, the 90 needle. And I'm just going to sew this to the edge and show you how I miter my edge. When I get down to the 1/4 inch, I'm going to then not change any of my settings. I'm just going to sew off to the corner like so, this very tip. Clip my threads, adjust my quilt so that nothing's going to get caught, and it sews smoothly. Bring up the fold, so I basically bring up that fold line, make it sure it's flush to the edge. And I don't start, the trick is not to start right at that point. You kind of want to start a little bit downwards so that it doesn't get caught in any weird way. That's for any kind of procedure. And you're going to go up a little bit. I will go back, stitch back a little bit to the edge, and don't go off the edge, and then I go back forward again, and then I keep on going, adjusting my quilt along. So I'm going to keep doing this until I get to the edge. There are some videos out there that show you how to join the edges together, and You'll want to do that. You'll want to make sure that you notice that you're ending your sewing and stop way before you get to the end, because you want to have that extra binding so that you can adjust it. So I'm getting a really good consistent, if you can see here, I'm getting a good consistent 1/4 inch all the way through, and it's going to easily be able to wrap around shortly. Okay, see you in a bit. Because I've cut my binding at 2.5 inches, I'm going to, when I get to the edge, I'm going to stop enough so that I have plenty of room to overlap. So I'm going to make sure there's no puckers or in my back, make sure that it's good. And I'm going to come over here, overlap my strip like so. And then I'm going to put my gauge right at the edge. It shows 2.5. And then right here, just on this one piece, I'm going to clip it. All right, so then I'm going to do that right now. So you can see I've clipped it 2.5 from that starting strip. So I started way down here. Okay, and I've overlapped it by 2.5, and this is where I'm going to join it. So I've pulled it around so that my join, this is the starting strip, this is the joining strip, and I've kind of just pulled my top that way, so you can see this is the top of the quilt and the strip. So I play around a lot first because you know, late night, busy day, you get discombobulated. So before you sew anything, I pin my imaginary sew line. So I'm pinning it across that way so that when I take everything back, I can see that it's going to give me a good seam. It's in the right orientation, and I'm ready to go back to my sewing machine and do it. And I'm going to get right, I'll show you again, right here. I might push it just a little bit more, this strip a little bit more over. I feel like I just need a little bit more from when I observed it, because it was kind of tight a little bit. Like I said, oh, it's a little bit tight. I just need that little bit. So I'm going to actually use every piece, every section. So when I come back over here, I'm just going to move this one over just a little bit over, and then do my line from that tip all the way to that tip. So it's joined, and it's going to look a lot better. I'm going to go clean it up. I want to go iron that, clip off the excess, and then I'm going to sew it again down from where I stopped all the way down to where I started, and it's going to fit perfect. And it's joined. Now I'm just going to iron it, give it a crisp edge all the way as much as I can. I'll show you how I do that. Sorry, I had to get the dogs away downstairs. They annoy me. So I'm going to just kind of iron it, go along the whole edge, all the way across, you know, all the way until I get back to where I started. So just kind of just giving it a nice crisp edge, because you want to be able to bring it all back around for the next step. When you get to the edge, just make sure you kind of iron right in there, and then again go all the way through. Just kind of get into the corner there, and then keep ironing. Now is the time to close any loose threads, or you feel it's gonna be a problem later. It's time to clean it up a little bit as you go. So I'm going to start right here. Once I've clipped, I'm going to bring over my binding with the fold line, and I'm going to clip it with a binding clip. And you can get these cheaply on Amazon. So I will pull it pretty tight at the edge here. So, and I will put binding clips sporadically as we go down. And it should all be the same level because you use that seam guide, you use the 1/4 inch foot, nothing was getting away from you. And I want to do all the way till I get to the corner, and then I'll do the next side until I get all the way back to where I started. When I get down to the edge, I'm going to make sure I have a good crisp martyr, and you notice my binding is looking the same. That's why I love doing this technique. I'm going to make it crisp, kind of finger press it, and then you're going to want to then bring it down here and have that corner like so, and you're going to put a clip right there. Okay, that makes a nice, really nice look to it. Okay, and note to self, after I'm done stitching this to the front, I'll go back and I'll whip stitch the edges on the front and the back of that edge. So that this is something that I learned from a judge, that keeps it intact a lot nicer, and they actually look for that. Whether it be a memory quilt that's just going to be used every day, I still do it, or show quilts for sure. So that's just one thing that's been on the judges' evaluations. But it also keeps everything nice and smooth too. So that would just be using a hand needle to whip stitch that part right there where it miters. Okay, I've secured it with that binding clip, and you notice I've turned the corner, I'm going down, I'm getting rid of any kind of strays. If you see any threads around, get rid of those. Always like to try to clean it up as I go too. And then after I'm done doing all that, I'll be back to where I started from with the binding clips, and then I'm ready to do my 3mm stitch along the edge, and I'll show you that shortly. Now to put on the finishings on the front of this double binded machine by machine quilt. So I've got my little box because the binding clips are going to go right inside there. Amazon sells them really cheap, and you get a little thing to put them in. That's great. I love it. So we're done with this 97D. We're not done with the seam gauge though, or the seam guide. So I'm just going to put that over to the side. I'm getting the 10D installed, putting the dual feed on there, everything. Oops. Everything looks good on that part. Yep. And I'm going to come over here, take my nut out for just a second. And everything is perfect with the way it looks on the front. I kind of double checked it. And I have threaded the upper thread to match my binding color. But the bottom thread is actually black because my back is black. And there is going to be a line that runs back here and blends with the material. I do not like to have the stitching on the back and the front of the binding. I like to have the stitching just on the front. That's just a personal preference. And this is how you do it with this technique. If you want to have it on both sides, that's probably someone else that does that on YouTube might be able to explain that to you. But for me and the technique that I use, and I do these quilts, I do tons of them a year, especially the memory quilts. I'm doing binding all the time. And I just like the look of having it stitched on the top and then nothing stitched right here on the yellow. So the stitching actually either runs very close to this or a little off to the side of it, okay? And I like that. I don't mind that for the memory quilts and any quilt that's getting washed a lot. I mean, that's why we're doing it. If you didn't want to have the line showing on the back, then I would say attach it to the front, iron it, flip it to the back, still use these clips, and then hand bind them so that you don't have any lines. But I don't mind the lines, and this is going to be good for my customer because they're going to have a quilt that lasts forever. We don't have to worry about it, the binding coming off over time. So this is the way I like to do it. So I'm just going to find a spot, and I'm going to lift up my quilt binding. I'm going to come down, and I'm going to see where it lays. It's laying right at the 5/8 marker. So I'm going to try to line it up there. And it may vary based on how you sewed it on there. But go ahead and find that sweet spot with your gauge or your guide. Screw it in. And I may want to just do a little bit more. I feel like it's just a hair off from that where that line was. And you have like this tunnel going on here from the flange of the 10D to the gauge right here. It kind of tunnels it in. And the trick is to really kind of keep everything straight and fed straight. Don't come like way over here and try to feed it, or way over there. That's why having a big table you can work on that controls the weight of the quilt is going to make yourself more successful doing this technique. Anytime that the quilt starts dragging or getting weird on you, it's going to change how this technique goes for you. So I definitely tell the hubby, I'm using the dining room table tonight, guy. You just gonna have to deal with it. So that's what I've done, and I love doing it this way. I've done this on the 535 without dual feed, and it still works. These Berninas are amazing, but 770 does a little bit better with the dual feed. It makes it a little bit easier, but the 535 can do it. I haven't tried it with the 475 yet. 475 I normally use for piecing, but I know it works on the 535 because that's what I had before I got the 770, and it works like a charm. So we're going to do the same, get it straight. We're going to start taking out our binding clips. It's going to be at a 3 stitch length. I have yellow on the top, black on the bottom for thread and the bobbin. I'm going to move over my stitch 2 times. Okay, if you feel like you want to go over 3, you can, just to be on the safe side. So 2 or 3, you judge by your needle and by the width of your, when you turned it over, you judge it by how you want it to be, a 2 or 3. I would not do it just at a 1. I would definitely do it at a 3. Okay, you will lock stitch it a little bit after you start. So we're going to start right now. It's giving me an error because I did not tell it that it was on a different foot, so let me do that. Okay, so I'm going to find my 10D. Here we go. We're ready to roll now. It's happy. Okay, so stitching. And, you know, I may go back to the 2 because I might think it's a little bit too far. It really depends on, you know, every quilt's different, you know. So, but I know I don't do a 1. I always do either a 2 or a 3, depending on how the quilt's looking. So I went back and forth, and I'm just gonna, and I go slow. I am not in such a rush to get this done. It goes by really fast just on its own, but I take the time to stop, adjust, take my clips off. I don't have any puckers when I do this. It works out great, and it stitches out so nice. So as soon as I can show you, you can see, I'll show it when I'm done, but you can see it's looking great. It's not even stitching on this yellow. The black stitching on the black. So that's what I like. I'm just going to tunnel through, feed it through. Everything stays right in place doing it this way. I'm going to keep doing it this way until I show you I do a lot of memory quilts a year, so this is my tried and true way for consistency, to keep something that they're going to take to the dorms and college, that they're going to be washing and manhandling or lady handling roughly. You know how they are. I got 2 of them. And, you know, it's just like, that's why I do it both ways. Show quilts, that's a different story. And you can notice as I'm doing this, I've kept that, when I kept that 1/4 inch on the other side consistent, and that's why I had the gauge, and I used my 97D, sorry, 37Ds for the 535. You're gonna get that same result of seeing it consistent on the other side. Now we're getting close to the border. If there was any fabric shifting, I mean, just take this and adjust it, finger press, because there could be some fabric shifting. Notice that when I get to the flange, it's like wanting to do something weird. So you just need to take either a stylus, like so, and then get under there so that you don't mess with it. And then just keep going to your stitch. And I look really close at it. And I'm going to turn it. Remember, needle is down on this machine. And then I'm going to, again, keep going. We'll finish those corners off by a hand stitch, because I will go back after we're all done. You can see here, came out nice, and I'm just going to whip stitch those in the front and the back. And again, I do that whether it is a show quilt or a quilt that's going to be washed a lot, because it just keeps it all together. When I first did a show quilt, I got dinged on that. So I was like, oh, really? That's something that they do? And you learn from those things and you become a better quilter. So I always look at judges' comments with how can I improve myself. And that was a long time ago. But ever since, I have remembered to do that. And I think it does make a big difference. It makes it look really finished. It makes it look more professional. It's not going to get caught in anything. And notice I am not puckering. It's looking very smooth. Very nice and tight, very full binding, and very smooth. So I'm going to continue doing this, and then I'll come back to you to show the finished result. Perfect mitered edge. It's sealed up now on both sides, and it is perfectly consistent all the way around the quilt. No puckering. It's just a wonderful and easy, fast way to get the binding on a quilt that's going to be used over and over again. It's also a great way to do it for show quilts, if you just do it on the top first and then flip it. So the tools I used was my Bernina 770 machine. So that was essential because it had the dual feed. You could try it on other brands. You just would need to have a 1/4 inch, a guide foot, what they call it, a stitch in a ditch type foot, or an edge joining foot, they call those. 97D would be the one you'd want to use for the 770. You could use a 37D for a 535 series. Make sure you have the guide. Go with it. I use the zigzag stitch plate so that I can move it over 2 spaces when I flip it. And 3mm on our machine. Look, I'd use a 2 when I was on the top. Of course, when you're doing it the normal 1/4, it's just going to be in the dead center of the quilt. And a 90 needle as well. So that's what I do for getting the quilts that I get in or that need binding, or the ones I do for my memory quilts. So it's very effective, works really well, and hope it helped you. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye.